The Athlon 200ge, my current favorite low-budget option, a miraculous low-cost dual-core CPU with an integrated GPU, which I have managed to run dozens of modern games on. It is no secret the fascination that I have for this little guy and what it can achieve for its price, but every time I talk about it, there's a certain comment that I see floating around. Ryzen 3 2200G Ryzen 2200G is only $25 for more than 2,000 videos. There's a strong sentiment online that there's not much point on this Athlon in a world where the Ryzen 2200G is only at $45 more. But is it really worth it? Hi, I'm Alex, the LowSpecGamer, and there's only one way to get to the bottom of this. Let's get started! Roll the cool intro!
So it has excellent performance and it's still very much recognizable when you're playing on a low resolution.
For gigabyte board, the Athlon 200G is not only an amazing APU, but an outstanding low-budget gaming CPU for 60 FPS in some games, or a nice 30 FPS in some of the heavier stuff out there. Not indoors or outdoors, it can do something like 45 FPS. This is another success that I did not expect. I played a full good, as I said, way over any integrated GPU that comes from Intel. Good start. 30 and 50 FPS. Okay, this one surprised me really good. Let's start from the bottom. The Athlon 200ge with a recommended price of $55. I will get into global pricing later in this video. What does it actually offer? Zen architecture, 2 cores at 3.2 giant bytes for CPU and 1 megabyte of L2 cache. 3 mega cores for the GPU, paired with dual-channel RAM at 2600 MHz. A quick test saw Fortnite running at lowest settings and full 720p at a very good average of 50 FPS without any major issues. The community benchmarking map of Counter-Strike Global Offensive at 720 saw an outstanding average of over 120 FPS, so this device is clearly capable of playing some of the lighter competitive titles. But what is this, the regular spec gamer? Let's bring out the heavy guns. Here's Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, something that is definitely outside the typical use case of this APU. And yet on 720p, lowest settings and shadows disabled using the console commands from my video, it manages a very playable 28 to 30 FPS average during a very intense combat scene, which is always a surprise. The Assassin's Creed Odyssey benchmark was an interesting case study. This game has not only a higher than average GPU requirement, but some of the most amazingly high actual CPU requirements that I have seen on a game ever. And yet, using the trick that I talk about in its own video, to reduce its internal resolution to 40%, it is playable over 30 FPS average on its benchmark. Not bad. Clearly, this APU can hold on its own or be a great CPU for 30 FPS gaming. Let's bring out the next contender. The Ryzen 3 2200 is, at the moment of writing, the cheapest APU on the Ryzen line at a $100 suggested price. That is almost double the price of the Athlon, and you pretty much get a bit more than double everything. Same Zen architecture, but 4 cores instead of 2, a bit of a higher clock, 2 MBs of cache instead of 1, and for the integrated GPU, 8 mega cores instead of 3. Yikes! Paired with the exact same RAM and the very same Wolfenstein 2 area, it ended up with an average of around 70 FPS, quite the jump from the just 30 we were seeing before. it is obvious that some increments in settings were acceptable. Fortnite delivered an average of 55 on the same area before, but this time on full 1080 rather than 720p, and this pattern sort of repeats. The Counter-Strike Global Offensive benchmark, instead of 720 on 1080, once again, averages 133. So more frame rate with a significantly higher resolution. And the mighty Assassin's Creed Odyssey was trickier. On lower resolutions, the 8 cores are more than enough, and the game runs into a very hard CPU bottleneck. Doubling the internal resolution from our previous test all the way to 80% of 720 means that both the GPU and CPU are working to the max, and it still gets a slightly better average than the Athlon. So very obviously, the 45% difference in price represents a more than 50% increase in overall performance. Let's quickly acknowledge some of the extra functionalities of both APUs, like overclocking. The Athlon 200ge is initially locked, but in reality, if you have a chipset that supports overclocking, MSI and Gigabyte boards allowed it to be overclocked. However, this is only a CPU overclock. As far as I know, the integrated GPU here cannot be overclocked. This means that for our test cases, which were mainly GPU bottleneck, there is not going to be much of a difference, but the CPU overclock does dramatically increase the value of the CPU and provides much better frame rate in certain games like Overwatch, or make a fantastic option for pairing it with a dedicated GPU. I have a full video on this topic. The Ryzen 2200G is completely unlocked, which means that you can overclock both the CPU and GPU using any motherboard with the correct chipset. In fact, a quick overclock of the integrated GPU to 1.3 GHz provided an important boost on the CSGO benchmark. And then we have memory support. As I have mentioned in the past, memory speed is important for integrated GPU performance. The Athlon only supports up to 2666 MHz DDR4, which is what I have used on this video, and the Ryzen supports up to 2993 MHz. This is a small but important detail, and when I use memory that could reach that speed at a stock iGPU speed and at the stock integrated GPU speed, the CSGO benchmark definitely saw a difference. This, of course, means spending more in expensive memory, but at least the possibility is there. So, easy peasy, right? The Ryzen offers more than double the performance and some extra features for less than double the price. Case closed. Unless, well, if you're familiar with my content, you already know it's not going to be that simple. Is the $45 difference really little? Let's do a mental experiment with my favorite 4 example countries. In the US at the time of writing, the Athlon is at $59.99 and the Ryzen at $99.57, which makes for the difference of $39.58. In Spain, where I live, the prices are 56.99 euros for the Athlon and 199 euros for the Ryzen. That is a difference of 44 euros. In India, the Athlon is at 4,924 rupees and 8,398 rupees for the Ryzen, a difference of 3,474 rupees. In Brazil, the Athlon is 274 reais. And 499 for the Ryzen, a difference of 225. Now here's where you're likely to start questioning my sanity and my ability to make an argument. Let's add some data for average income in these countries. Note, if you live in any of these countries, you're going to look at this monthly average income and likely shake your head. That is because the average is not a good way to really approximate how much the regular person makes. Median income is better for that, but I could not find a good source that includes India and Brazil. If you know any, send me an email. If you add the reported average income per country and calculate how much the difference between both GPUs is as a percentage of that monthly income, a trend becomes interesting. The changes between regions give you a better perspective on how this decision can affect different people. If jumping to the Ryzen means a small percentage change in your income, like in the case of the United States or Spain, the decision to make that jump is very reasonable. If your situation reminds you of India, then the decision is a bit more tricky. But if your situation is close to that of the Brazilian people, where the price difference between both is $60 and that represents literally more than 8% of your freaking income, then the Athlon 200ge is an amazing choice. You get a perfectly usable and overclockable dual core, which can pull at least 30 FPS on some of the most demanding stuff I have tested. So who wins? it actually depends on you. In fact, time for you to help me out a little bit. You will find my source for average incomes in the description, so look up what's the price difference between these two APUs in your country and what percentage of your country's average income will that represent. Let me know in comments. And if you're looking for a used GPU to pair with that Athlon or some other part of your PC, or just a nice souvenir for the channel, I actually got a problem that you can help me with. I have run out of space. This is not an exaggeration on my part. I'm having trouble buying parts or receiving donations because I live in a very small apartment. So I took a couple of hours and built a simple website where I will start adding the stuff that I do not need. And it's called LowSpecSurplus.com. You can check the details of which video the item was from, and I'm willing to part from them at a price much lower than eBay. But you got to email me with the subject line in the website and let me know why I should send it to you. Do you want to upgrade your PC, or you just want to have a souvenir from a video you really like? Come on, convince me. I have had this stupid idea for a while, but never got around to making it because I didn't have time to make a website until Wix contacted me, this video sponsor. I was able to produce a professional looking website very quickly, and they have a professional solution for every website type and vertical. Since Wix takes care of all the heavy lifting, like reliable hosting to keep your website safe and secure, you can focus on what matters the most, which is creating a nice website. Sound cool? Check them out in the link in the description. Thank you to them for sponsoring this video and you for watching as always.